let's bring you this story. Government is said to be spending billions of rand a month, and economists are now worried. And this comes with some warnings by the chief economist at economist.co.za, Mike Schussler. He's going to talk to us about what it all means. Mike, good morning, and thank you very much for talking to us on this public holiday. We saw your tweet where you are mentioning the staggering amount of money that's being spent by government every month, and you are warning that this is a very, very deep hole. I'm quoting your words on Twitter. How bad is it?
Well, at the moment, we're spending roughly 50 billion rand a month more than we receive in revenues. So we're making 50 billion rands in debt. And it's going to get worse because we know from the government budget that we're heading to 65 billion a month. And that is a huge amount of money. That means it's basically we're spending 2 billion rand more every day than we get in income from that the government gets in income. The government is spending 2 billion rand a day more, and at some stage we have to pay that back.
Where is this money? Sorry, Mike. Before we talk about that payment pain we are going to suffer, where is this money going to? Is it all due to COVID-19?
No, about half of it was going to happen anyway. So about 325 billion was going to be our deficit. It was going to be large, and that's why we got downgraded. Now, however, because of COVID-19, our tax collections are coming in. We believe now roughly 313 billion less than was expected. So there's another 300 billion. We're also going to be spending over 50 billion more on everyday things like grants. We're also spending more on hospitals and so on. So it all adds up. We get to a hole that government has got at the moment between 710 billion, which they are hoping for the year. But many economists are now looking closer to 800 billion for the year. Let's split the difference, and we're looking at just over 2 billion rand a day. And yes, it is the taxes they're not collecting because people losing their jobs, the cigarette, the alcohol ban, people are driving less, so less fuel taxes are collected, less VAT is collected because when people lose their jobs, they don't have money to spend. So we're looking at a very bad revenue for government, and at the same time, government is having to spend more, so they're spending more on grants and so on. Remember, this also leaves out the UIF because the UIF is something different, but basically we're looking at a government that's going to spend about 100 billion rand more this year.
Does the picture get worse if you factor in the loans that the government is now getting, including the one that's coming from the IMF as an example?
Later, yes, but we must remember the IMF the IMF loan is helping us to fill the hole. We need to find ways to fill that hole. If you're going to spend over 700 billion for the year more than you're going to receive, you need to lend the money somewhere. And as you know, we've been downgraded, so our debt is becoming more and more expensive. So what the IMF is doing, they're giving us about 10% of that, which is 70 billion rand, roughly speaking, and we pay a very low interest on that. So that gives us a bit of room to maneuver. But we've got to remember, we're going to have to cut back somewhere and tax higher. So, and we're already a high tax country. Yeah. So we are in very, very deep trouble in the next few years. It's a very difficult hole to get out of.
Just to get the numbers clear, you said this is going to be spending 700 billion rand more than it will be collecting, and it's expected to collect about 800 billion.
No, it's expected to collect just over 1 trillion still, but I'm saying the whole could be. The government is saying their deficit, the difference between what they collect and what they spend is going to be 710 billion. We already know that's on a bit of optimistic figures. So most private sector economists have gone a bit bigger. To put it into perspective, it's going to be, the government says it's going to be about 14.6% of our GDP. Most private sector economists are around 16% of GDP, which would make South Africa of the major economies the second largest budget deficit. And at 16%, it would be roughly 800 billion rand that hole will be. So we're going to have to find 700 billion, and we're only getting about 70 billion from the IMF, about 10 billion from the New Development Bank, probably about 10 billion from the African Development Bank. So we're going to have to go back to the IMF. We're going to have to look at our pension funds. We don't want them to, but that we are major funders of our own government spending through our pension funds and through our banks. And we're going to have to probably enter the international markets again. And that's going to be expensive, unfortunately.
And painful over time. Thank you very much. Chief Economist at economist.co.za, Mike Schussler.